Nathan Cole had built Cole's Fresh Market from the ground up, starting with a single neighborhood grocery store and growing it into a successful chain of 20 locations across the state. From the very beginning, he prided himself on fair wages, strong employee support, and a positive work environment. He believed that a company's success depended on its workers, and he had always promised to treat them with respect and dignity. For years, things seemed to be running smoothly, profits were steady, customers were happy, and his management team assured him that employee satisfaction remained high. But lately, something didn't sit right. Reports from corporate headquarters showed a rise in employee turnover, an increase in customer complaints about service, and rumors that workers were struggling financially even while working full-time. Nathan couldn't ignore the numbers, but when he brought his concerns to his regional managers, they brushed them off, saying, "Retail jobs are tough," people complain, but they stay. Yet that explanation felt hollow. Nathan had built his business on the idea that hard work should be rewarded, and if his employees were leaving or struggling to survive, something had gone terribly wrong. Instead of relying on filtered corporate reports and dismissive explanations, Nathan decided to take matters into his own hands. He needed to see the truth firsthand, not from behind a polished executive desk, but from inside the stores themselves. He chose a location in a struggling urban neighborhood, 2 hours away from his corporate office, a store where reports of dissatisfaction were the highest. But he wouldn't be walking in as the CEO in a suit. Instead, he would be Nathan Smith, a new overnight stalker, just another worker trying to make ends meet. A disguise, a fake resume, and a willingness to start from the bottom, that's all it would take to find out what was really happening inside his stores. Nathan had no idea what he was about to uncover, but one thing was certain. If his employees were suffering, he wouldn't stand by and watch it happen. It was time to go undercover. Nathan arrived at Cole's Fresh Market 14, a mid-sized grocery store in a struggling urban neighborhood, just before his first overnight shift. Dressed in faded jeans, a worn-out hoodie, and an old baseball cap, he looked nothing like a CEO. His usual polished confidence was replaced with an air of quiet uncertainty. Just another worker clocking in for a long shift. When he stepped inside, the first thing he noticed was how tired everyone looked. The store itself seemed clean enough, but something felt off. Employees moved like they were running on autopilot, avoiding unnecessary conversation, their expressions dull and drained. Nathan walked up to the front counter, where a young assistant manager named Trevor glanced at him over a clipboard. "You the new guy?" he asked, barely looking up. Nathan nodded. "Yeah, Nathan Smith just started." Trevor didn't bother checking his paperwork. "All right, grab a cart and start stocking aisle 6. We're short tonight, so don't fall behind." That was it. No proper welcome, no training, just a rushed order to get to work. As Nathan pushed a cart of canned goods down the aisle, he overheard a quiet conversation near the self-checkout lanes. A cashier, Hannah, muttered under her breath, "I swear, I can't even afford groceries from here and I work here full-time." Nathan felt his stomach twist. Was she serious? He slowed his pace, pretending to adjust items on the shelf as another worker, Miguel, responded, "You're not the only one. They shorted my paycheck again this week. If I complain, Trevor's just going to cut my hours." Nathan's grip tightened on the metal cart. Wage theft? Shorted paychecks? Employees struggling to afford food in their own store? Nathan's unease deepened as he watched how the store functioned. Employees worked double shifts with no breaks, shelves remained half-stocked because there weren't enough workers to handle restocking, and customers grew frustrated with long lines and slow service. Worst of all, Trevor, the assistant manager, barely lifted a finger, barking orders, shifting blame when things went wrong, and treating employees as if they were replaceable. Nathan had come here expecting to find some minor management issues, but what he was witnessing felt like systemic neglect and abuse. His employees weren't just overworked, they were being exploited. And if this was happening here, how many more stores were just like this? One thing was clear: he needed to keep digging. Nathan settled into his new role as an overnight stalker, determined to see firsthand what his employees endured. It didn't take long for the cracks in the system to become painfully clear. Training was non-existent. His mentor, a 19-year-old named Jordan, had only been working at the store for 3 months and was just as clueless about certain procedures as Nathan was. Just throw stuff on the shelves and try not to mess up, Jordan muttered with a half-hearted chuckle. That's basically the training manual. Nathan fumbled through his tasks, struggling to keep up with the unrelenting workload. Despite working non-stop, shelves remained half-empty, and customers who came in late at night often complained that basic necessities were missing. But it wasn't just the lack of training or poor organization that concerned him. It was the way employees were treated. Throughout the night, Nathan observed Hannah, the young cashier who had complained earlier about not being able to afford groceries. She was exhausted, her movements sluggish as she rang up purchases. Despite this, she tried to keep a smile on her face for customers. Every so often, she would discreetly glance at the clock, as if counting down the minutes until she could finally leave. When her shift ended, she didn't even have the energy to make it to the break room before sinking onto a nearby bench, rubbing her temples. "Another double tomorrow," she muttered under her breath. Meanwhile, Miguel, a stalker who had been with the store for over a year, pulled Nathan aside near the back room. "You new?" he asked. Nathan nodded. "Yeah, just started." Miguel let out a humorless chuckle. "Good luck, man. They don't care about us here. You work your ass off, they cut your hours, you ask for a raise, they find a reason to write you up." Nathan frowned. "That can't be legal." Miguel shrugged. "It isn't, but no one fights it because they need the job." Nathan's frustration grew as he witnessed the mistreatment firsthand. Trevor, the assistant manager, barked orders but never lifted a finger to help. When a customer knocked over an entire display of cereal boxes, Trevor didn't offer to help clean it up. He pointed at Hannah and ordered her to handle it, even though she had already clocked out. "Clock back in if you have to," he snapped, walking away. Hannah hesitated, then sighed and did as she was told. The final straw came when Miguel's paycheck arrived and it was short again. He showed it to Nathan during their break, shaking his head in frustration. "I'm missing almost $40, Miguel muttered. "That's half my gas money for the week." Nathan clenched his fists. He had set clear wage policies for his company. No employee should be making less than a living wage, and no one's paycheck should ever be shorted. If this was happening at one store, how many others were experiencing the same thing? By the time Nathan's shift ended, he'd seen enough. His employees weren't just overworked. They were being exploited, manipulated, and silenced. And it was happening under his name. Walking out of the store that morning, Nathan knew one thing for certain. Change was coming, and it would start with this store. Nathan didn't wait another day. That morning, instead of returning to his shift in his worn-out hoodie and jeans, he walked into Kohl's Fresh Market 14 in his tailored corporate suit, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. Employees who had ignored him just a day ago now froze in place, their eyes widening in shock as recognition set in. Hannah, who was behind the register, nearly dropped the roll of receipt paper in her hands. Miguel, who had been stacking produce, straightened up, his mouth slightly open. The new guy wasn't a stalker, he was the CEO. The atmosphere in the store shifted from exhaustion to uneasy tension. Nathan didn't have to say a word before Trevor, the assistant manager, stormed over, his face already turning red. Mr. Cole," he started, but Nathan held up a hand, silencing him. He turned instead to the employees gathered nearby, his gaze landing on Hannah. "Is it true," he asked, his voice calm but firm, "that you can't even afford groceries after working a double shift?" Hannah froze, her eyes darting between Trevor and Nathan, clearly afraid to speak. When she hesitated, Miguel stepped in. "Yeah," he said boldly, "and she's not the only one. They cut hours, short our paychecks, and expect us to shut up about it." A murmur of agreement rippled through the staff. Trevor let out a forced laugh, shaking his head. "These employees exaggerate, sir. Retail is tough. People complain, but—" "I was here," Nathan interrupted coldly. "I stocked your shelves. I cleaned up spills. I watched as you let your employees suffer while you stood back and barked orders. I saw the payroll discrepancies, the last-minute schedule changes, the fear in your employees' eyes when they so much as asked a question. And you want me to believe they're just complaining?" Trevor stammered, but no words came out. Nathan took a deep breath, then turned to the gathered employees. "Starting today, things change," he said. "Trevor, you're fired." The store went silent, Trevor's face twisted with disbelief. "You can't be serious." I've been running this place for years." Nathan's voice remained calm but unwavering. "Then you should have known better." Trevor threw his name tag onto the counter before storming out, slamming the door behind him. The employees stared at Nathan, still uncertain, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Nathan wasn't finished. "Every missing paycheck will be corrected," he continued. "Wages are increasing immediately, schedules will be set in advance with no last-minute changes, and if anyone has a complaint, you bring it directly to me." For the first time, hope flickered across their faces. Nathan met Hannah's gaze. "You deserved better. You all did." For the first time in a long time, the employees of Kohl's Fresh Market 14 stood a little taller. The store was silent for a long moment after Trevor stormed out. No one quite knew what to say. Employees glanced at each other, then back at Nathan, as if trying to process whether this was real. For months, years even, they had worked under the weight of fear and exhaustion, believing that nothing would ever change. Now, in a single moment, their tyrannical manager was gone, and the CEO himself was standing in front of them, promising something better. Was this really happening? Nathan knew words weren't enough. Real change required action, and he wasn't going to leave until every issue had been addressed. He turned to the employees gathered near the register. "I want to hear from all of you," he said. "What's broken? What needs to change?" At first, there was hesitation. Years of being ignored and dismissed made them wary of speaking up. But then Miguel stepped forward, shifting nervously before saying, "Honestly, we need more staff. We're always short, and it's impossible to keep up." Hannah nodded. "Yeah, and training is a joke. Half the time new hires quit because they're thrown in with no guidance." A ripple of agreement spread through the group. Another employee, Jake, a night shift worker, added, "And schedules. We never know when we're working until the last minute. Some of us have families, other jobs. We can't just drop everything at a moment's notice." Nathan listened carefully, nodding as he took mental notes. "All right, here's what's happening immediately," he said. "First, we're hiring more staff, no more skeleton crews. Second, training is getting overhauled. Every new hire will be properly trained before they're thrown onto the floor." He turned to Miguel. "You've been here over a year, right?" Miguel hesitated, then nodded. "How would you feel about helping create a real training program? Something that actually prepares new employees?" Miguel blinked in surprise. Nathan smiled. "Yeah, you know what it's like on the ground better than anyone at corporate. If we're going to fix this, I want people like you involved." A slow grin spread across Miguel's face. "I'd love that," he admitted. "I just never thought anyone would care enough to ask." Nathan's expression softened. "I care, and I should have asked a long time ago." He turned back to the group. "Effective immediately, wages are increasing across all locations. No one working full-time in this company should be struggling to afford groceries or rent." A stunned silence followed his words. Then Hannah let out a shaky laugh. "This doesn't feel real." Jake crossed his arms, skeptical. "Are you serious? You're really doing all of this?" Nathan met his gaze with determination. "Yes, and I'm not stopping here. If this is happening at one store, it's probably happening at others. I'm going to every single location to make sure this stops. For good." The weight in the room shifted. For the first time in a long time, the employees stood a little taller, hoping to replace the exhaustion in their eyes. Hannah stepped forward, her voice softer this time. "If you're serious about fixing this, we'll back you up. We want this store to succeed. We just needed someone to care." Nathan held her gaze and nodded. "I do. And I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, the store felt alive again. This wasn't just another shift, it was the beginning of something better. 2 weeks later, Nathan returned to Kohl's Fresh Market 14, but this time he wasn't undercover. Word of the sweeping changes had spread fast. Employees across the company had heard the rumors. Higher wages, stable schedules, proper training. Some were skeptical, fearing it was just another corporate promise that would fade. Others were cautiously hopeful, waiting to see if things would really change. The moment Nathan stepped inside, he felt the difference. The store no longer carried the weight of exhaustion. Employees moved with purpose, not dread. The shelves, once half empty, were fully stocked. Customers weren't just rushing through their shopping trips. They were chatting with cashiers, smiling. Nathan's eyes landed on Hannah, now standing at the register. She greeted customers with a genuine smile, not the forced one he had seen before. Miguel was training a new hire, walking them through procedures with patience. "You actually came back," Hannah said as she spotted him, raising an eyebrow. Nathan smiled. "Told you I wasn't going anywhere." Miguel approached, wiping his hands on his apron. "You weren't kidding about following through," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "We just hired 2 new people. First time in months we're fully staffed." Nathan nodded. "And the training program?" Miguel grinned. "Still a work in progress, but new hires don't look like they're about to quit on their first day, so I'd call that a win." Before Nathan could respond, the front doors swung open and a man in a corporate uniform walked in. Greg Howard, one of his regional directors. His expression was a mix of relief and apprehension as he made his way over. "We need to talk," Greg said quietly. "There's a situation." Nathan's stomach tightened. "What kind of situation?" Greg sighed. "Other stores. Some managers aren't happy about the changes. They're saying the wage increases are hurting their budgets, that they can't hit performance targets with higher labor costs." Nathan's jaw clenched. He had expected resistance. Change was never easy. "Which stores?" he asked. Greg handed him a list. Mostly older locations. Managers who've been with the company for years. They think the old way was just fine. Nathan scanned the names. He recognized every single one. He exhaled slowly and handed the list back. "Set up the meetings," he said. "I'll visit them personally." Greg hesitated, then nodded. "Understood." Nathan turned back to Miguel and Hannah. "Keep doing what you're doing. This store is proof that change works." Hannah smirked. "You mean proof that we were right all along?" Nathan chuckled. "That too." As he stepped outside, he knew his work wasn't done. Fixing one store was just the beginning. The real fight was about to begin, and he wasn't backing down. The story of Nathan Cole teaches a powerful lesson about leadership, accountability, and the true value of employees. As a CEO, Nathan believed in fair treatment and ethical business practices, but he had become disconnected from the reality of his workers' struggles. His undercover experience revealed the harsh truth. His company was failing the very people who kept it running. The biggest lesson learned is that leaders must stay connected to the people on the ground. Data reports and executive meetings don't always reveal the full story. Sometimes, leaders need to step into their employees' shoes to see the truth firsthand. Nathan's journey proved that good intentions aren't enough. Real change requires action. Additionally, this story highlights that employees are the backbone of any company. When they are overworked, underpaid, and mistreated, the entire business suffers. By recognizing their struggles, making necessary changes, and standing firm against resistant management, Nathan demonstrated that a company's success should never come at the expense of its workers' well-being. True leadership isn't about maintaining power. It's about listening, adapting, and ensuring that success is shared. In the end, Nathan didn't just fix one store. He set a new standard for his entire company.